Hello, Kennedale. Welcome back to another Kennedale News video edition. This is a special edition, local election 2020. And before I get to my guests, let's just have a word from our sponsor. Right now, this wouldn't be possible doing the Zoom meeting for the amount of time we're doing it without the Kennedale Rotary Clubs allowing us the use of their Zoom meeting that they're using during COVID. And I know you guys seen the flags around town, and if you watch the series, you've heard me say this before, but the flags around town are done by the Kennedale Rotary Club. And what that does is it's actually a fundraiser for Kennedale ISD students. And what we do is we give a scholarship for our winners for the debate. And we also allow the students, the seniors, to put out the flags as a fundraiser for their prom. So all you have to do is go to KennedaleRotary.com. We put these out and pick them up 6 times a year. And it's $50. And all you got to do is click on this link right here and fill out the form and sign up, and we'll have you all set for next year. If you have any questions, you can reach out to KennedaleRotary.com or myself if you have, and I can answer those questions as well. So without further ado, we'll get to our guests. Today we are going for talking about City Council Place 2. I have the incumbent Councilman Chris Pugh. I have reached out to Gary Mitchell and I spoke to him today and he couldn't make it. So Gary, whenever you're ready, if you want to do this video interview, I am ready for you. We'll do a one-on-one. But for now, Chris, I appreciate you showing up and having this coffee chat with us.
I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. And I also appreciate the Rotary Club letting us use this format so that we can do our best to get this information out during this tough time.
Yeah, unfortunately, instead of me investing in the Zoom, I invested in this mic. So I'm happy the Rotary Club allowed me to use that as well. Okay,
sure.
So yeah, I mean, you're running an election, and I know you've seen a couple of the videos so far. So let's just get some of your information out, and I have a few questions as well. But first, why don't you go ahead and tell us just a little bit about your past and your experience.
Briefly, my younger past, I grew up in West Texas near Lubbock. I went into the military and did military service in Germany during the Cold War. Back at that time, Colin Powell was a 2-star general, and Norman Schwarzkopf was in Alaska as a 1-star general.
Yes.
Had military history in my family back to the Spanish-American War, so that was something I wanted to do. I actually enlisted when I was 17 and went active when I was 17 years old. My mother signed my waiver. And after I got out of the military, spent a lot of time in different retail careers. I worked in the video industry during the height of the video rental store era and did that for many years. And, more current history, I moved to Kennedale in 2015. And shortly after that, I got involved, like many people did, being upset about some things that were going on with our water rates. And I went to the council and spoke. And as Mayor Johnson is known for doing, I made a complaint. So we said, well, let's see if we can find somewhere for you to help. Committee 3, I think, was the one I was on, which was a review of the rates that had been put into place. During that time, I became friends with the chairman of the P&Z, Ernest Harvey. Ernest Harvey asked me to apply for the P&Z, which I did. And Ernest was a great mentor and taught me a lot. And I interviewed with some of the council members. Mayor Johnson wasn't available, and they felt like giving me a seat. I earned a seat on the P&Z. I served there. I also served as the chair of the P&Z for several months prior to entering in the council race. My wife and I have been married almost 4 years, and we chose to stay here in Kennedale after we got married, and this is where we plan on staying for as long as we're around, I think.
Okay, and you were a former police officer as well, correct?
Yes, I served for a couple of years in Farmington, New Mexico. I went to the academy when I was in my 40s. Most of the guys I was in class with, they were all born the year I graduated high school. So it was definitely challenging, but at the same time, being an older person in the academy, there was also learning in both directions. And so I really benefited from working with those younger guys, and I think they benefited going through the academy with me, and we all passed and we all went on to different careers. Some folks are still in law enforcement. Some have chosen to leave and pursue other professions.
Sure.
I came back to Texas. My family is all in this area now. My parents are all in their late 70s or older, and I had spent most of my adult life far away from my folks, and decided I needed to get closer, and ended up living here in Kennedale, and have enjoyed my time here very much.
Yeah, so you worked as a police officer for a couple of years, but and I know your opposition has been hammering it. And to be clear, it wasn't Gary; it was your other opposition. But they're hammering you on about being a former police officer. I mean, would you consider yourself, a police officer? I mean, is it kind of a lifelong thing, even if you served for a few years?
I absolutely support the police. I did not leave because I was angry or unhappy with the direction of law enforcement. And, anyone who served as an officer, whether it's for a few months or whether they do 35 years, like some of the folks around here, I think it's part of something you enjoy. It's a career that you feel called to. And even though you may not actually be serving as an officer, I think anyone that's done time, whether it's military, police, TSA, law enforcement as a profession, sheriff, I think all those folks feel an obligation to do the best they can to be good citizens and to help law enforcement if the need was to ever arise within the limits of the law and based on the situation they find themselves in.
Do you think that's a strength that you bring to the council, that perception of being a police officer and going through all that?
I think that some of the things I learned in the academy, which have helped me, and kind of, it starts out with the whole water thing. So when I didn't really understand what was going on with our water rates, I started digging into the evidence and trying to figure out, how did we get to where we are? It's kind of like if you arrive at a fight and you've got two people that are injured and both of them are saying the other person started it, you've got to try to figure out, based on the evidence and through research, what really happened here today. Mm-hmm. And so I think that has been something that has helped me learn about government, is that when I didn't understand why the water rates came up, I started getting in there, digging through the information that was
I lost you there, Chris. See if we can get him back.
I said, I don't think that.
There we go.
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
So I went through that process of learning, trying to figure out why the water rates where they were. And that doesn't make me that you're happy. I mean, none of us were happy, but I understood how we got to that. I understood how we got there and why the rate had to go where it went. And that gave me a better understanding. I think the investigative side of me helped me to look at those facts and accept the facts, even though they weren't really the answer that I hoped for. I think it also, when you're in law enforcement and other careers like firefighting and EMT service, you have to make quick decisions. You have to react. You can't just sit back and let things happen. And so sometimes on the council, we have to make decisions maybe in a shorter time frame that we would like. Sometimes we can delay things or have a longer discussion, but occasionally an item comes up. And a good example would be when Fathom went bankrupt. We didn't have a long time to make a decision. We had to make a decision today. And I think that, being able to work through a critical situation like that is something else that I learned in the academy, as well as out on patrol, that you sometimes have to make decisions, make the best decision you can with the information that you have right then.
So you keep bringing up the water. So let's just go ahead and go down that rabbit hole right now. I mean, currently, and the mayor gave us a pretty good update yesterday of where we're kind of at. And I know Councilman Altum also did a press release that we put out on Kennedale News and Facebook as well, explaining where we're at. So putting that aside, there are some issues going on right now in the water. Do you have an update on that? Could you enlighten us on what's going on?
I don't know that I have that much more information than what the mayor shared, but the short version would be kind of putting off, if we start where we are now, or maybe just a short time back. We had a plan in place as a council with our city manager, George Campbell, working it out through the city of Arlington, for Arlington to take over our billing, as well as taking over the operation of the system. And we made an agreement with Fathom to work through that process, to provide Arlington the information and the software that was needed to make that conversion happen. And in good faith, we paid the fee that Fathom asked us for.
How much was that fee?
$200,000, I believe.
Yep, 250, I think it was. Yeah, you're somewhere around there.
$250, somewhere in there. After the budget, I'm sorry, the numbers are a little
Yeah,
floating around there.
I completely understand.
Yeah. So, we paid the fee in good faith. And at that time, we had no reason to believe that Fathom was not going to honor the agreement. A short time later, Fathom informed us that they were not
Taking our
going to
money?
be doing business anymore. And they certainly did not offer our refund back. So that folks understand, it wasn't just us. It was Phoenix, Arizona is another city that
Yeah.
used Fathom for their billing. I believe Haltom City did as well. And so we
Albuquerque, New
had
Mexico too.
major cities all over America with a bankrupt company. We as a council decided that spending legal fees to potentially recuperate a portion of our $200,000 was not the way to go. And so we chose to let that go and focus on the issue at hand, which was we've got to figure out how we're going to bill our water out today. We went to muni billing, and there were some issues with the meters not being able to be read through the wireless system. And there's a lot of pieces to that. The Verizon wouldn't honor the contract when Fathom went bankrupt. The wireless encryption that was put on the meters from Fathom. So Arlington had to go out and read meters manually, which had not been done in Kennedale in many years. One of the challenges that brought to us was that some of the meters, they were not able to locate them the first round. And there were some folks whose bills were estimated. And I know that the city has done their best to notify folks when they've called to let them know we did have to estimate your meter, and here's why. That did cause some people some stress, and I understand that, especially if your estimation was incorrect and larger than what you thought it was going to be. Then you had a bill that was maybe unexpected. During the process of, we decided to approve Arlington updating all the meters so that they could be read by the Arlington system, which was the ultimate goal. And during that process, there were some meters that were determined to be reading inaccurately. A number of those registers were removed. Some of those were replaced. Some of them were tested outside the company who manufactured them, tested them to determine what's the failure and repair them if possible. And again, that resulted in additional estimations because of the complications that brought. And that, again, caused another round of bills that may have been incorrect. And I know that there have been people receive corrections. Not everyone has gotten an adjustment, but there have been a number of people who've received adjustments after this process. And we still have some other folks that are struggling with bills that they feel are not correct. I know you're in that boat.
Yes.
I know that Lakita is working on some of those. Some of the answers that I have heard that I'm not going to divulge confidential information, but there were some folks who just didn't pay their bill for whatever reason, whether it was some just outright didn't want to pay it because they felt it was wrong. Other people may have been in a situation where they couldn't afford their bill. So they accumulated 2 or 3 months of bills. I think there were some issues with some checks not passing through the system prior to the next billing cycle. So people had paid their bill, but they got a bill for 2 months. It's just some things like that. And then there are still a few, like yourself, that I believe Lakita is still working to resolve that I would say are unknowns. But I believe at this point, the number of the unknown errors is very minimal. Not to diminish the people that are suffering through that.
Sure.
But I think the majority of the mechanical meter issues have been corrected, and they're working to make adjustments with folks as best we can and help everybody get through a tough time. Right now, the way I understand it is, we're waiting for a few more things to be approved by the state so that Arlington can begin providing the majority of our water while we use the what we have to use through the Fort Worth contract until that expires. The city of Fort Worth was also a partner in this transition. George met with the city of Fort Worth, the city of Arlington, and everybody went over everybody's contracts. Fort Worth was not unhappy with us. They understood why we did what we did. They approved it. George spent an enormous amount of time with the city of Arlington, who retained a retired employee to finish the negotiations and work this deal out. And hopefully in January, February, we will fully transition over to billing and water being provided, the majority of which coming from Arlington.
Woohoo! Finally.
And further down the road, when the contract with Fort Worth expires, then we will end buying the water that's required from Fort Worth. And the ultimate plan would be to shut our wells in.
Yeah, we kind of have to, actually.
They're very expensive.
Yeah.
They're very heavily regulated by the state.
Extremely.
Operating them costs a lot of money. The maintenance is expensive.
And like I told Brian the other day, we're not allowed to drill another one, and we need another one.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it only makes sense. And, we could, there has been a discussion about what could we do with them. Maybe we could sell one of them to somebody. And those are some legal questions that have to be asked later on, that there might be a private entity that wants to purchase one and go through the process to be approved by the state to purchase that well. And that's always an option. But those are things to get to once we get our water connection with Arlington accomplished, so that we can provide everyone with good drinking water and have our billing system more level.
Please.
And yes,
it's been a decade.
I agree. It's been a problem. It's been stressful to all of us. I don't like having, and you and I have spoken, I don't like having to take a call from you that your water bill is wrong.
Yeah.
I don't like to take that call from anyone.
Sure.
But I believe that Lakita and George and the city of Arlington are doing their best in a very difficult situation. And not to blame COVID-19, but not being able to have face-to-face meetings about some of these things doesn't help resolve issues quicker.
It definitely has made the problem last a little longer, or take a little longer in my experience.
It drags out, and that stresses everybody out, and it's unfortunate. But I don't believe that anyone at the city of Kennedale or the city of Arlington is trying to roadblock anyone or causing problems. I think everyone is truly trying to get to the bottom of the few remaining meter issues, so that we can all move forward and trust that our bill is honest and correct and accurate.
And that's what I think mine is, a mechanical issue, because it just so happens the month that we got it, and we got it early in the month, like first week, later in the first week, or early in the second week. And then the bill was utterly a disaster and a surprise to us. And then they came out and tested it. And once they tested it, it actually said it was a little bit in our favor, but our bill magically went down after that. And so to me, I do think it was something mechanical, and I'm not blaming Arlington. I'm sure that once they tested it, it tested fine, but maybe it was broken until they tested it. I don't know. I'm just a troubleshooter. I'm not a mechanic, but
and that brings up another issue that Fort Worth has experienced recently, that they found out that the new registers are more accurate than old registers. Mm-hmm. So people are using they're not changing their personal habits, but their water usage has increased. And that's because over time, the mechanical parts favor the customer over favoring the billing. So when you get a more accurate meter, then that can potentially cause someone's bill to go up a certain amount if their meter was falsely reading because it's just worn out. And the city of Fort Worth, like I said, they fought that same issue where people got new meters and their water bills went up. And that's potentially another cause that we may have had in Kennedale, or someone may have had a meter that they've been benefiting from. And unfortunately for the present situation, now they're being billed for what they're using. And it appears that they're being overcharged and actually being charged more correctly than they were prior to the meter being replaced.
So you've been on council for a term now, so it's 2 years.
Yes,
and during that time, because I've seen a comment on Facebook's in the political commentary that's going on there for local stuff, that the water bill was increased exponentially in the last 3 years. Is that true? Can you give us some insight on that statement?
No, the last time the water bill was increased was essentially 2 council cycles ago, I'll call it. None of the folks who voted on increasing the water bill the last time it was increased are sitting on the council presently. And about 2 years ago, maybe in that range, the bills were 4 years ago, the bills were lowered once. When I came off of the water committee, we made a recommendation to the council as a committee to not lower the rate. And the council voted to lower the rate anyway, because they heard the word of the citizens. Mm-hmm. They had received a petition that, even though it did not meet all the requirements, the council still wanted to give the respect to the citizens who signed the petition, mm-hmm. and made the decision to slightly lower the rate at that time. And then on the council that I served on my first year, there was an additional decrease in the rate. We did not all vote for that decrease, but when we vote as a group, then we support the move as a group, and
Absolutely.
it passed. And so the rate was lowered again. So it's actually gone down twice in the last 4 years. There has not been an increase. And I hope that as we make this connection with Arlington, we continue to see the benefits of the economy of scale by gaining engineering services at a lower cost, by having equipment that we don't presently have access to for
Better
doing
tasting
maintenance
water.
and repairs. Then we can hopefully lower the rate again. But we want to get through connecting the systems. We don't want to be behind the 8 ball if we slash the rate and then the connection of the systems costs money, then we're going to have to go back the other direction and put the water fund back into a bad situation. So at this point in time, the direction of the council is, and of our city manager is, we're getting very close. We have a few more physical connections to make. We have to get the sign off from the state before we can open those valves and let that water flow. And once we get through all that, then we will sit down, whoever is on the council at that time will evaluate the status of the water sewer fund, the rates, and get some advice from our finance director on what potentially the rate change might or might not be. I would hope that we can lower the rate, but I'm certainly not promising that to anyone right now. But I know that I would like to see us take a look at that once the connection is made and we can get a full realization of what the savings through the Arlington contract is going to be.
And I'll do one more question before we move on the topic, but I know I've been involved for a lot longer than you. So as a newcomer, the stance of the city has always told us that they don't use the water as, income, basically as a source of income. Would you agree with that assessment, being on the council for 2 years now?
Yes, I would agree that the purpose of the water sewer fund is to provide water and sewer service to the city and to make repairs and modifications to the system as needed. We do have some repairs that may be needed, but we don't want to go out and spend $800,000 to $1 million to fix a water tower that we may not need once the connection to Arlington is made. Mm-hmm. So the fund stands on its own. The money that does come out of that fund is basically to pay administrative costs because we don't have a water secretary, so to speak. We don't have a water and some other things. So the folks that do spend a little bit of time managing that fund, a small percentage goes into the administrative costs. But that fund is not a for-profit enterprise. It is there to provide the citizens of Kennedale with water and sewer services and to expand and repair the system as needed.
Okay. All right. So since we're kind of on the topic of expenditures and stuff like that, just recently the council had voted to increase the tax rate in Kennedale. Comparatively, the Kennedale ISD decreased the tax rate instead of increasing it. You were there. I know you're one of the louder voices on the council on budgets and talks like that. Why don't you go ahead and give us just kind of an update on your perspective of that, especially from all the different meetings that you guys had over the months?
The tax rate this year was very difficult, and I really want to try to focus on where we are today, or where we were at the time that we were accepting the budget. We were in a position where the fund had been drawn down in the previous year. We are in a situation now where we were looking at drawing the fund down again in the coming year. And we talked about many things, and I'll own it. I brought up closing the library. And I brought that up. I'm not saying I'm for closing the library. Yay, let's close libraries.
Yeah, I know you're not.
But when we're in those meetings, that's what those meetings are about, is people put out ideas. Mm-hmm. Councilman Wandell brought up outsourcing outsourcing ambulance and potentially fire.
And he spent a lot of time researching that too.
And he did.
Yep.
There were folks that said, well, what if we eliminate this position, or what if we eliminate this program? And that's what those meetings are for, is people put out ideas. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that it's what you like, but maybe you're putting it out there to see, does someone else have another idea? Do people agree with it? Do people think that's the craziest thing I've ever heard? And through the course of those discussions, then we come up with, well, what can we do in this budget that maybe the city manager and the finance director haven't already thought of? And so during those talks, it became very apparent, as in most cities where our personnel is our primary expense, in almost every enterprise, payroll is always your highest expense. And the police and fire department in our city are about 66% of our total expenditures for a year. And one of the constant feedbacks that we get is, I want to be able to see more police. I want to see policemen in my neighborhood. So to me, reducing police department coverage is not an option. We already are in a situation now where we have minimal staffing.
Yes.
And if there was a serious incident, we would have to reach out for help, especially if we've got one officer who's booking someone into jail and we have a major incident in town. There's one guy by himself. He's going to have to reach out to Everman, to Mansfield, to Arlington for assistance. And while agencies do that and help each other all the time, agencies want to be able to stand proud on their own and not have to reach out for assistance unless it's just absolutely necessary. And officers do constantly think about that. Hey, I'm by myself. What is this situation going to do if I jump into this alone? Do I need to wait until backup gets here?
Especially nowadays.
Correct.
Yep.
And that situation may escalate while you're waiting for assistance because the other officer on duty is far away. And I'm straying off the topic a little bit. I apologize.
No, go ahead.
During the budget talks, these are all things we talked about. Do we eliminate this position? Can we add that position? What can we reduce? Where can we save? And when you look at our staffing, many of our departments are a one person in one role, or one person doing a couple of things. So as an example, if we decided to cut our code enforcement officer, well, now we have no one enforcing code at all. There's no one in the city doing that job. Or if we, lose someone in many of the departments, then there's no one to cover that role because some of them require special training, special licenses, expertise. And so it became very obvious to us that if we really did not want to reduce staffing. And there were some folks who said that we should. I personally don't believe reducing staffing was the right decision. And as a council, as a group, when we came together, we did not reduce our employees. We unfortunately did not give them their pay increases that we had hoped to this year. We did not give the first responders their step increases this year. Mm-hmm. And part of that was doing what we could to minimize the drawdown on the fund balance.
Let's talk about payroll for a second, because that's also a topic that's pretty hot right now. Mm-hmm. I just want to reiterate what you just said, and that was, you were there on council 2 years ago. It was your first year when council had voted for the step plan, correct?
Yes.
And since then, we have not been able to fund that.
Not fully and not permanently, no.
Okay. And do you think that things like this hurt morale in our city workers, or does it just prevent us from literally hiring another staff member or a police officer?
I think it's some of both. I mean, you want to have people be able to make a fair wage for the role that they play, whether they're a city secretary, whether they're a parks worker, whether they're a lieutenant in the fire department. And when we looked at the study that was done, Kennedale was way behind the bar in pay. And even when we did our best to implement the step plan, we were not able to get everyone to 100% of what the market is. And so, Dallas is in the same situation. They pay their officers 40% less than neighboring communities. So the city of Dallas loses police officers to Allen and Frisco and Prosper and those areas on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. And Kennedale is in a similar situation. We lose officers over salary on occasion. That is one reason people leave. And we're trying to minimize that. We would like to have a more stable environment so that our first responders stay here for the long term. And one of the things that it takes to do that is a good wage. Do they have to be at 100%? There will be people that would stay here for other reasons, but the closer you can get to the market value in those professions in our city in any role, the more likely that person is going to spend their 20 or 25 years serving the city of Kennedale. They have to have good facilities. There was some talk prior to the pandemic we're facing now of trying to do a new police and fire station, a joint station. The fire station was built in the 80s. And while Chief Brown has done an excellent job utilizing that facility and making improvements, the department is pushing the limits of what that facility is capable of doing. The police department is pushing the limits of what their building was originally intended for. It was built with a staff that was about half of what we have now. Unfortunately, those projects take a lot of money, and that's the kind of thing we would want to take to the voters to decide on. But going back to the budget, during the budget talks, we were presented with several tax rates, and each of those tax rates produces a different amount of drawdown in the general fund balance. And obviously, the higher you go on the tax rate, the less that drawdown is. So, the council as a whole, we were in the position of trying to make the decision on, if we're not going to cut personnel, what can we find? And we did find a few things. And what is a tax rate that we think is fair given the current economic times, the pulse of the town, where we've had an increase in recent years, we've had a decrease as well. And what can we do to provide the citizens with the services that a city should provide? Good streets, good roads, nice parks, police protection, fire protection. Those are your basic responsibilities of a city. And so when it was all said and done, we chose kind of the middle option, we'll say, which was a small tax increase. But we are still drawing down our general fund balance a little over $300,000 for the year.
That'll drive it down to how much? Like, instead of 25%, it would be what, 16%?
Roughly 8 to 8.5.
8%.
8%. And that, again, Lakita's very conservative when she makes her projections, so hopefully we come out better than that.
Sure.
But I think 8%. Obviously, if the minimum is 18, and we're at 8, we're not even at halfway where we need to be, and we have to turn that curve. One of the things that I hope will help is we have got a number of developments underway right now in different stages of residential development.
Yep.
And once those come online next year and the property taxes begin to get collected, then we will see our city revenues increase. We're hoping, again, to see a decrease in what it costs us to run our water and sewer department.
Yep.
And so potentially there might be some relief on the water rate based on the outcomes of how that pans out in the long term. So, my goal is not to raise taxes. I have to pay the same taxes as everyone else, and voting to raise taxes is difficult for any of us.
So
as a group,
how did we get here? You've been on the council for 2 years. Obviously, this doesn't happen overnight. How did we get to a point where we're driving down our savings from the recommended 25% standard to 8%?
I guess the short version would be is that a couple of years ago, a council that I was a member of approved a budget, and they did not approve the funding required to pay for that budget. And that began the downward cycle that we're on presently. And I was on that council, and although I did not vote in favor of that tax rate, I bear the responsibility being on the council that did. And I want to do what we can to try to break that cycle. And that's through a combination of managing the funds we have as best we can, trying to find savings where possible. Unfortunately, we did have to increase taxes a few cents this year. But when I went out and talked to citizens and asked and explained to them what we need now, what we need in the future, the majority of those folks said, well, I understand if we need another policeman, that does cost a certain amount of money. If we want to keep the library open, that costs money. If we want to continue to have a code enforcement officer. And so the feedback that I got was just do the best you can to keep it as minimal as possible. And I think that this council did a good job of coming up with some ideas and finding some additional savings. And a little bit of it was painful, but we're in tough times. and we're trying to do the best we can as a council to come to an agreement on how we're going to move forward and grow this fund balance. And Lakita believes over the next 2 to 3 years, we will see that fund balance come up. And that will be key in the future as we have some bond money coming up, that when we go to the bond board, if they see us going in a downward spiral with our finances, it costs us a lot more money to get a bond to build a street or fix or build a park than if our fund balance is going up. If our fund balance is going up, we have a much better chance of getting a better rate. And that's one of the decisions that the council will have to make next year. Whoever those 5 members are, we have about $6 million in bond money that's freeing up next year. The thing is to be done with that money. I have my own thoughts, and if we want to get to that, we can, but that will be the decision of whoever's on the council next year. And that could potentially affect the tax rate as well. And these other projects, I know the Parks Board has worked on a bond offering. That'll be a vote of the citizens if they're willing to make that sacrifice based on what the results and the outcome of the bond would be.
And for those who are just new in the area, the parks package that we're working on is new baseball fields and a soccer field for that area, and just kind of general upkeep for the parks. And that's what we worked on for a year. I wanted to kind of segue because I know there's some new people in town who've been asking for this kind of information. Go ahead. Were you still with me, Chris? Let's see if I give him a second. Maybe. There he is. Hey, Chris. You back? There we go. No problems. Okay, so you had mentioned in a statement before on how, if we obviously increase what we pay our workers, we can keep a quality worker for 20 years. But one thing that happens in a small town scenario is that we get a lot of big town workers who have retired, and they're not ready to really quit, and they come, and small towns like us, we hire these experienced workers to come and work it out, and it's a double benefit. They get maybe a second retirement, and we get their experience and sometimes their connections. In George's cases. So in George's case, he was a former city council for like a long time in the city of Arlington. City manager, I'm sorry. And that benefited us in the water thing. So one of the criticisms out there that I've seen a lot lately, and I know you have too, it has been towards George, and that we should have reduced his salary for the budget. Now, my first question to that is, do you think that would have made a dent? And my second question is the hypothetical. If you were for this and you guys passed a law that said this, what were the repercussions from that?
Say the second question again.
So if you guys said, yes, we need to reduce George's budget tomorrow and did that, what's the repercussions from doing that?
Okay. George brought a great deal of experience to the city of Kennedale. And I personally think that we're very fortunate to have his experience. And I would absolutely say that we would not have gotten the Arlington water deal done in the time frame that we did if it had not been for George and the things that he brought to the table, the people that he knew. I mentioned earlier, one of the folks who helped finalize this deal actually retired from the city of Arlington, and they retained him as an outside consultant because he and George had worked together and were in the middle of this agreement. And so if it had been anybody other than George Campbell, then maybe the city of Arlington would not have kept that person on staff. And then we would have had to start those negotiations from zero all over again with a new person.
Sure.
George worked tirelessly to get this done. And as a side note, many people are critical of saying that we don't hold George accountable or that we don't have tough conversations with George. And I can speak for myself personally. I know that I've had tough conversations with our city manager. Have I had those
Me too.
on the Zoom meeting at the dais? I have not, because I don't think that that's necessarily the right venue for me to vent out my frustrations or my disagreements with our city manager. I've also had many great conversations with George where I have asked him to show me, point me in the right direction so I can learn something, or how did this happen? How does this work? Who do I need to talk to, or where can I go to get this information? And George has been able to provide me for that as well. So I think it works both ways. That, you know, if you have a job wherever you work, and if your performance is poor, hopefully your supervisor doesn't berate you in front of the rest of the crew about your poor job performance. Hopefully they take you aside, you have that conversation privately, and hopefully professionally end the conversation, shake hands or agree, or whatever the outcome is, and you move forward to be in a better relationship with each other. And I've had tough conversation with George, but when the conversations are over, it's over. It's not personal. And we move on and try to learn from that conversation and improve on whatever that area is. It could be my performance. It could be something I made a mistake on or didn't understand. It could be me unhappy with the decision our city manager made or the way something was done. But that doesn't mean that he's done a bad job any more than if your supervisor takes you aside and gives you negative feedback. They're trying to help you, or they're trying to work out a problem. And I have never had a time where I have reached out to our city manager about a concern that I have not been able to get an answer. Now, is it always the answer that I want to hear? No. Sometimes the answer is not what I want to hear.
But gotten that same experience with George.
But I'm always able to get an answer. And sometimes he may have to get back with me, but he gets back with me. And I allow him that time to find those answers. As far as changing George's compensation,
before you answer that, would you agree that you feel that it's oversight and not micromanaging when it comes to the relationship between council and staff?
Absolutely. My job is not to tell Secretary X what to do. You know, the council as a whole makes a decision, tasks the city manager with that decision, and lets the city manager accomplish it. It's not my job to tell George what I want done. My role would be to bring up an idea to the council to get consensus from the members. And if the members have consensus on that goal, then we task the city manager with it. But the city manager is not my personal person to direct. The city manager is accountable to the council as a whole, not to any one individual. Now, that's not to say that I can't call George and ask questions, but I would never task George with accomplishing a goal that the council as a whole had not come to an agreement on.
And I always make, before you answer the second question, I always make the analogy of that is, you know, the first Continental Congress found a military man by the name of Colonel Washington and said, "Hey, can you direct our army and win this?" He said, "Yes." And they said, "Go forth. Here's your authority. Now go do what you need to do." And nobody micromanaged him. And because of that, his failures and success, we now have this country. So I always make that analogy. He kind of set that tone on Continental Congress. They could have micromanaged him. There were some complaints during the time when he was retreating instead of attacking and losing a couple of key battles. But, you know, nobody micromanaged him. And the benefit was, hey, United States, you know, 200 and some odd years later. So second part of that question, if you guys fired him tomorrow or said, "Hey, we're going to give you $30,000 less a year," what are the repercussions of something like that?
Well, terminating George, which would require a supermajority of the council to accomplish,
which is 4-1,
which would be 4 of the 5 members, would result in George receiving an entire year's worth of compensation. So we would be out that year of compensation, and we would not have a city manager. And then we would have to go out and pay another city manager for a portion of that year's time that we would have just paid out to our present city manager. So that's just poor management of our money, unless there is gross misconduct. I mean, a felony crime or something of that nature. Terminating Mr. Campbell in the middle of his contract would, number one, just be a terrible financial decision. and in my opinion, just a poor decision in general. We're near the end of George's contract extension, and he's working hard to finish this deal with Arlington. He works tirelessly, and he's very well aware of the problems you've had, the challenges we have with getting this connection made.
I'm pretty loud.
The challenge that this budget cycle has presented. But you talk about the micromanaging. George tasked Lakita with getting this budget together, and she worked with him and got it done. I wasn't there, but I would guess that George didn't walk into the office every 5 minutes saying, "Hey, Lakita, what are you doing? Which line of the budget are you on?" They worked together and They worked.
He's not that kind of leader at all.
No, he's not. Yeah. So they worked in collaboration to get that done. It wasn't micromanaging. And back to what you said earlier, that my job is not to micromanage the staff or to task individual staff members. If I have a request, if it's something minor, I go through the city manager, like if I need a report or I have a question. But if it's anything more than that, that should be the consensus of the council. And, this council as a group, all 5 of us voted to extend George's contract. It was a unanimous vote. So, we had our private discussion, and we discussed the pros, the cons, the benefits, regrets, whatever you want to call that. And as a group, we decided to extend that contract for 2 years, primarily to allow the completion of the water agreement with Arlington, and then to have a transition period so that hopefully our next city manager could spend some time with the present one, instead of it being, March 30th, the old city manager leaves, and April 1st, the new guy walks in with no background, no history, no training, no handoff.
Yeah. Instead of saying, "Jinx, you owe me a Coke."
And that's, that's not good. That's not a good situation.
No.
So, the ultimate goal is for there to be some type of a handoff. Obviously when we're in a budget crisis, we're not going to pay somebody to work a whole year with George. But I would hope that we can find the funds to at least have them spend a few weeks together, 30 days or more, in order to have a clean passage from one city manager to the next, so that our city can continue to function, and that person can learn the history of how we got to where we are and where the budget is headed, why the decisions were made to take the budget in this direction, or where we are with this agreement, and so forth.
So we'll go ahead and segue to local economy, because obviously budget, one of the issues of the budget is that we are literally like 95% property tax based, and we barely have any point of sales here in Kennedale. And so as the mayor put it the other day in his interview, the more rooftops we have, the better it is overall to spread out the pain of supporting the city. So what do you think the role of the city government is for business, for local economy, or maybe some of the ways that they can help stimulate?
I think the primary role of local government is to come up with policies and rules that are friendly to business that's trying to come in, so that they can understand this is what it takes to I want to open business. Why? Here's what it takes to accomplish that. And then see that, checklist or policy through to the end. There's many people who say, well, the city needs to open a grocery store, or the city needs to bring in this business. And the city's role is not to open grocery stores. That's the business of entrepreneurs, people who go out there and put capital into the market and come up with either a new idea or purchase a franchise or build a business from the ground up, whatever they want to do. That's the job of the individual business person. And then the EDC has a role in that to help draw businesses in. And the end of town next to I-20 is a good example of what the EDC accomplished. They took some businesses that were not well respected.
Yep.
And over a number of years, those businesses went away. And now we have businesses that are generating incremental tax revenue compared to the ones that were there in that time.
I think the QT is the number one point of sale right now in town, in the limits, correct?
I believe that is correct.
Sales tax. Yeah, I believe so too.
So, it would be very good if we could get some more retail businesses. I know that one of the parcels of land that was recently sold in this past year was zoned for some commercial business over on Sublet Road.
Hmm.
And we are expecting to get 3 or 4 businesses in that area. We have the mixed use development that is still in the planning stages at Sublet and Kennedale Parkway
Hmm.
that will also have some business parcels in it. And once those start coming in, then we'll begin to see the sales tax revenue, which again, ultimately, we hope to lead to property tax relief for the citizens. But it takes time, and it's a vicious circle. You have a business, every business has their own business model. When I was in the video business, we had a model that said, okay, you need this many people within this many miles of a potential location for us to sustain a retail store that rents out videos at this price point.
So
So you go into
shop
a town.
local, Kennedale. Shop local.
So you go in, you look at a parcel of land, and you pull up the demographics. Sometimes the Chamber of Commerce can present those. Sometimes there's an EDC that can present those. Different cities have different methods. And then you analyze and say, okay, well, I need this many people to support a video store. Well, there's not that many people here. I'm going to go down the road 2 miles, or I'm going to go down the road 4 miles and look again. And that's the process that businesses are doing when they come to Kennedale. Unfortunately, we're not at the household count that many of those businesses require to put a shop in downtown Kennedale.
It doesn't help that Arlington, like I said, is nipping at our heels over here with the Walmart, the Kroger, and that's basically how those business owners saw it. Was probably a little bit easier to put it on the corner of Kennedale, so they can get the Arlington side and the Kennedale Grove side,
right?
And it's kind of centralized. But we didn't benefit from that.
We have the subdivision there over on Wildcat Way, which is about 93 houses, I think is what the final count was.
Yes.
And there's going to be another 10 or 12 across the street. So that's about 105 households between those two. So if it's an average of 2 people per household, which is, I don't know what the average in Kennedale is, to be honest, but we'll say 2 to be low. We're adding another 250 people in those 2 developments. We have others that are in different stages. We have the apartments that are going to be going in out on Business 287, on regular 287 out behind Albertsons. And we hope that some of those citizens will also come into Kennedale and benefit from us. So it's a cycle. And once we get the folks here shopping local, living local, then you get that household count up to where larger companies will consider putting a retail store in our town center or on our parkway or in a mixed use development because they have customers at hand. And that is the struggle that Kennedale has right now, is we're not quite to that customer count, we'll call it, that some of those larger retail and restaurant locations are looking for in the center of town. They're on our outskirts like McDonald's because they catch the traffic from the interstate. And we benefit from that. We benefit from that, absolutely. But that's not in downtown Kennedale, where a local resident can walk over and shop and eat. And that's what we're hoping for, is that as we get some additional residents, then we'll see these businesses start to come in and generate more sales tax dollars.
So one of the issues with that, and this will segue into our last topic, which was your accomplishments. So I'll let you give you some time to brag about yourself. But one of the issues was sidewalks. So I know a particular citizen around town who lives over there by Delaney, and he walks over to the Subway or to the antique store or the church, the Methodist church, all the time. You see him around town, but he has to walk on the grass. So the sidewalks grant that we were looking for, which is one of your accomplishments, something that you've worked on, I know you have. Why don't you update on us and then go ahead and continue and tell us what you've done?
So the Safe Routes to School project was a project to put sidewalks in the Crestdale neighborhood, which is where I live, to connect the schools and the neighborhoods for the folks that walk to and from school. And another portion of that was potentially a crosswalk across Business 287, so that the students who live in the Old Town side of the highway would have a place to cross the street safely. It's a fast road. It's a busy road for an elementary student to cross, either on their own or with a parent. And So we approached the COG and we applied for that money. The council set aside our portion of the funding, which was some matching funds that were to be put in. And we ran into some issues with TxDOT and putting in the crosswalk. It turned out that TxDOT had the wrong speed limit on their maps. When they came out here to Kennedale, they found out that the speed limit on the parkway was lower than what they thought it was. And so that held up the process because they weren't willing to put a crosswalk in.
Oh, bureaucracy.
In a road of a certain speed. And they actually had to come out here, and a guy went out and looked at the parkway. I was like, oh yeah, you're right.
You're right.
We went wrong. So that's,
we're not lying to you.
and then we missed the cutoff for the application in the first round. However, there is some additional funding methods that they have available, and they are pursuing funding this project in a different manner than was originally intended. It's just it has delayed the project, but it would greatly benefit everyone involved. So the crosswalk has kind of been put out of the project for now till we worked it out with TxDOT, and the focus is doing what we can control here in Kennedale, which is working with the school to put in traffic mitigation in front of a couple of the schools to slow folks down. They came out and did some preliminary engineering for where the sidewalks could be placed. So we're at the point now where we're waiting for the COG to sign off on the funding, which will hopefully we can get done next year. And I hate to say that because I was really happy about that project, because when I come home in the afternoon, my street is full of children walking in the street, people pushing strollers, riding bikes or tricycles, and it's not safe. It's not safe for the driver, and it's not safe for the children. And so it was disappointing for that project to get pushed back, but it's been delayed. It's not been canceled. We had some people mention, well, we bonded out that money, now we're paying interest on it. That is true, but we had to have that funding secure in order to put in our application. You can't just say you're going to have the money. They want to see the money and know that you have it available as soon as they approve it.
Sure.
And so we are paying a small amount of interest on that money, but the full intention is to use that money for the sidewalk and the Safe Routes to School project when it's completed.
So you hear that, Robbie?
It'll get done.
You hear that, Robbie? Your neighborhood's going to have sidewalks, my friend. I know you want that. All right. So your other accomplishments in your 2 years and in your previous experience with the boards.
When I was on the P&Z, one of the very first cases that came up in front of me was the Magnolia Hills development on Wildcat Way. And we went through several iterations of that where we were concerned about different things, and the developers were very willing to work with the P&Z before they made their presentation to iron out any concerns that we had. And so that passed through the P&Z and was approved. And then when it came to the council, it was approved by the council. And I'm very happy for that neighborhood because I think it is some housing that is needed in Kennedale. It will be, in the median home price range. It'll be smaller lots, which there are a number of people who want those. I know that we hear and read pushback about small lots. Yeah. And there are people who want 1 acre homes, and that's great. But there's also people who want a tiny home.
That's true.
There's people who want a small home with a 1/4 acre lot.
There's people who want an affordable home.
And I think that one of the responsibilities of a government and of a council is to provide diverse housing. And that encompasses apartments, large residential, medium residential, multifamily residential. All of those are part of providing living opportunities for our citizens and our staff members. And we've approved a number of developments in the past couple of years, and I think we've approved many diverse types of housing. We've approved a couple of larger lot areas. We've approved townhomes. We've approved apartments. Recently we approved tiny homes with a community green space out near the racetrack.
Racetrack, yeah.
We approved a senior development, which was another area.
By my house.
People have said, hey, we need more senior living because the waiting list for what we have now is very long. So I'm very proud of the diverse accomplishments that we have made of approving various types of housings in different price ranges, anywhere from entry level homes. And I know people are like, entry level is 180,000. Well, 180,000 is a very entry level home in today's market. And so we've approved homes that are going to be targeting the 180 price range all the way up to large lot homes that will be several $100,000. And I'm proud that we have put out many diverse housing opportunities to our residents. I'm proud of the fact that even though we have had struggles with the billing, that we came to an agreement and that we will be getting water from the city of Arlington in the very near future, which has the taste and quality and pressure of our water system has been at the top of many people's want list since before I moved here.
Yep.
And I am proud of the fact that I was able to play a role in supporting the city manager getting that accomplished in the time frame that we have. I mean, that would normally take years for two cities to form an interlocal agreement.
Yep.
And, this was done in a matter of months. And that was, again, a lot of credit to that goes to our city manager for his experience and his connections.
I know you fulfilled one of your campaign promises to me personally, not to your elected, which was, and I've been hounding council for years on getting rid of Fathom. Even if it meant breaking contracts and paying the money, that they were the worst company and they were going to literally do what they did to us. So I was psychic, but I appreciate you in supporting that, because it was, even though we got the short end of the stick with it, which was to be expected, getting rid of them was the best thing that has ever happened to the city, in my opinion and my experience with Fathom.
Well, coming from somebody who's having trouble with their present billing, that says a lot that you appreciate that.
Like I said earlier, please fix this. It's been 10 years.
Yes.
I would love to have, my electric company, I don't hear from them. My T-Mobile company, I don't hear from these companies because they get it right. So I would love to have a 1 year with a clean billing record.
I guess, the other thing is, I would like to ask the folks that are watching for their vote. I know that I've made some controversial decisions in my first term, but I do not have regrets about the things I voted for. I have voted from my heart, from my conscience, and from conversations with people all over town, whether it's by email, text message. And I don't regret any of my decisions. Mm-hmm. If I'm chosen to serve the 18 months remaining in my term because of the way the elections fell, next year, the big challenge we have is going to be our infrastructure and our first responder equipment. We have some bond money coming up next year, about $6 million. Mm-hmm. We need about $1 million worth of equipment for our fire department. They have an ambulance that has been on the replacement list since my first year living here, and every year for various reasons, the replacement of the ambulance has been pushed back and pushed back. And Chief Brown has said unequivocally how critical it is that this ambulance be replaced this year. We also have a fire engine need. It's time to rotate our fire engines, first line to back line to wherever backline fire engines go.
To the fire engine heaven somewhere in Kentucky, right? Was that where we got the last one?
So I'm hoping that that the council as a whole will agree that that's a priority, and that we could structure a portion of that debt to equal to the life of that equipment. We certainly don't want to do a 30-year bond on a 10-year fire engine. No, we want to structure the bond to meet the life of that equipment. And then we will have some other money, and we will have a list of projects. Larry has presented water and sewer and street projects on several occasions in the last 2.5 years. And it will be up to the council to come to consensus and prioritize those based on need and cost, and actually have enough money we can move forward with some projects, which is exciting.
So I have a new campaign promise for you that you can help me fulfill now that you bring up Larry. I worked with Larry for a long time on the Parks Board. One thing that he's been need is not only a couple workers, but he will settle for one worker that specializes in grass. Because we have so many parks, we absolutely could use somebody like that on his staff to take over, especially if we do this new bond and the people agree to it for the parks. So that's my task for you. If you win your next election, go ahead and plug your how people can contact you.
You can always email me at cpugh@cityofkennedale.com. Anytime. I do my best to answer emails as best I can. Sometimes the answer is I don't know, or sometimes it's you need to call this person. But I try to do my best to answer those questions and to get folks the help that they need. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. I have email access pretty much all the time, and you're always welcome to email me. I've even had some people stop by my house. It's not a big town. People know where I live over on Timberline. So I've had folks come by the house and talk to me. I'm always willing to talk. I can't always promise that I can fix your problems or that everything's going to be okay, but I will at least listen to what folks have to say, and try to do my best to get them to the help that they need. I feel, and I appreciate that you said that, Jeff. I feel like I kept the commitments I made during my first term, that I wanted to try to move the city forward. And I feel like that we have approved things across the board, whether that's contracts, developments, staffing. I think we've done many things to help Kennedale be better than where we were 2 years ago. We still have some struggles. We still have the billing. We still have some financial struggles to try to get our property taxes down and our sales tax up. But I believe that Kennedale will accomplish that, and that we will be a bright and vibrant city when we come out on the other side of all this.
Okay, well, Councilman Pugh, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate you giving me your time and your insights. I really feel like we went down a lot of rabbit holes there, but I really do think we got the information out there, especially some of the new citizens who've been emailing us about some more information. So thank you again for coming on the show.
Sure.
And Kennedale, we appreciate you following this series. This is it for the last episode of the series. Unless the candidates that could not make this, if you want to reach out to me, I'll be more than happy to do a one-on-one with you. We'll make sure we get your message out as well. And in the meantime, Kennedale, tune in next time at youtube.com. Go ahead and subscribe to us and hit that notification bell. That way when I do a video, you get notified. Thank you.
Thank you.